So that brings us to HCBS. So there's the rule number, if any of you are rule geeks like I am and love to pore over those definitions, because that's what I do in my spare time, because I love it. 512392902 is where you'll find a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. So just to give you some history about this rule, just like I tell a lot of you folks, like when SSAs or families or guardians want to give you a little bit of pushback, I'm like, throw me under that bus. Say that lady from the state said I had to do this. I like to do the same thing to the feds at this point. So the feds came out with, some decisions that came from Supreme Court rulings about what has to happen when you're receiving Medicaid services. So the federal government, the Medicaid Services Division said, you guys have to do things differently now. And so Ohio had to do things differently now. So we created this rule as a state to come into compliance with those federal regulations. So we really don't have a choice about it. And honestly, I think it's a good plan. I think the feds made a good decision. They put good requirements in place, and this is the way Ohio has interpreted so that we can become in compliance with this rule. Anything you want to add to that? So the three main themes of this rule that I'd like you to come away from with today is community participation, the achievement of outcomes, and meaningful opportunities. I'm going to kind of break those apart and go through them with you. So first, community participation. I'd like to, when I go out to sites, I like to see that folks aren't just being a presence in the community. They're not touring the awesome sites that there is to see in your county. They're not just, going and running errands at shops and stores, but they are participating as a meaningful contributor in their community. How you'll see that is people will be engaged with other folks. Sometimes it's through groups, sometimes it's through making friendships, sometimes it's by going to the same place over and over again until folks know your name and they know what you order, and pretty soon you're going home for Christmas dinner. But it's about making those connections that create relationships. That can look really different for lots of people. And I showed this video because I think sometimes it's hard for us to think outside of the box in the service system that we're in. It's like, well, folks that we serve like to go to these 6 places. We're really sure of that. Those have always been successful. And when you have someone come in and say, I'd like to be a comedian. And we're like, what? You want to do, what is it that you would like to participate in? So this video is great. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to see Asperger's Are Us, but it is a delightful film. So this is the trailer for that movie. And I just want you to imagine while you're watching this what the conversation around the ISP team meeting sounds like. I love to think about it when these gentlemen are like, I'm going to start my own comedy troupe. And the team just being like, okay, how are we going to support this person to do that so that they can connect to their community in a meaningful way?
Yeah, it's just not, it's not set up.
I run away in fear.
We're Asperger's Are Us. We're the first comedy troupe composed of people on the autism spectrum.
So if we're not funny, blame it on Ethan's disability. You should come to what might be our last ever show.
We'll be able to do material that we've worked on but haven't performed yet, and also it'll be really, really silly. We want to sell out Earth. This is definitely the most challenging show we've had. We want aliens to come to the show and be turned away because it's full.
There's parts that are screwed up. There's parts the audience doesn't get.
But we're realistic, so if the aliens get in, that's okay too.
It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be hard to think in this way. I was born this way. I've been more stressed than I have been in the past.
We're hypersensitive because something's irritating us from the inside.
I'm saying that I feel upset.
All of this stuff that's hard, that's difficult for us, this is what we get for starting Asperger's Are Us.
I asked. I'm not talking about you. I want you guys to leave. I just want it to be done now.
It's a lonely, lonely world.
This is my diagnosis, the actual time I got diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and I skipped home because I felt freer than I ever had. It explained everything that had ever happened to me that didn't make sense.
When you have Asperger's, you can do things that are really, really great.
great, not in spite of having autism, but through it.
Doing really good, dude. I'm really happy that we're in this troop together.
Never have I interrupted. I'm so sorry to cut you off.
These guys are my best friends. I don't really have anything bad to say.
This gazebo has the stupidest sign. What the hell else are you gonna do in a gazebo? Not a cause, baby.
So those folks are participating in their community. They're getting together as a group and talking with friends. They're riding trains. They're accessing all the places in their city that they need to go to practice. They find places to do their workshops, and they find relationships in the community so that they can have the supports they need while they're out. Like practice space was a big one in the film, and they needed a team to get together to help them be successful and to produce their own show. So sometimes thinking outside the box about what community participation really can look like. So the next one,
If you touch the screen.
touch the screen. Just touch it. There you go. Okay. Is that right? All right, so when you're thinking about community participation, there are some requirements in the rule that you need to meet. So you want to find out if the person selected this setting from a choice from a non-disability perspective. Was like a senior center looked at? Was a community job looked at? Did they have a choice between something that was specific to individuals with disabilities or not? In the video I just showed you, one of the comedy troupe members was not a person who received services, but was actually like a camp counselor at a place for people with autism. So while he did have a disability, he was also part of the community, and they kind of created their own group. They also went out into the community in places. They did their show not just for people that attended the workshop or people that were served by the county, but for full access to the public. So do they have the right to privacy? Are their rights being restricted? We want to make sure that the setting isn't regimented and that they have the freedom to move around and make choices. We also want to make sure that people that are participating in the service have choice about what those services look like. So that sounds, like a lot of rule language, but I see some heads nodding. We're on the same page? Yeah? We're feeling like we get it a little bit about what community participation looks like? So we also need to talk about outcomes. I know the SSAs are like, yes, we need to talk about outcomes. So when the team gets together and decides what's important to you and what's important for the individual, they then decide upon an outcome. So the individual leads that process from a person-centered perspective, and then the services in the plan should line up with that outcome. So in order to achieve those outcomes, then the providers of service need to know what the outcome is and what the person needs to support them. That can be really tricky when it comes to employment or community integration. Sometimes people have ideas about what they want to do, and then there's sometimes the limitations of what the provider is able to offer them. But at the same time, if you are agreeing to provide services to a person with an outcome and you know what that outcome is, then you're agreeing to provide the supports and the services needed to achieve that outcome. So this video I shared because one, it's a local gentleman. This young man was accepted to Oberlin College for his poetry. His outcome was that he wanted to go to college in an integrated setting with the least amount of support needed from staff. This is also a very delightful film, so if any of you have the chance to watch Deej, that's his name, what he goes by Deej. Well, I'll just let you watch it. I like this one a lot.
My senses always fall in love. They spin, swoon. They lose themselves in one another's arms. Your senses live alone like bachelors, like bitter, slanted rhymes whose marriage is a sham.
Most people still perceive of kids with autism as bad.
Until I learned to read and write, people thought I had no mind.
People just don't understand, I guess.
Trust that they can learn.
Reading and writing are rarely taught to non-speaking autistics.
You plot to get my people free. Hope to help the other kids have meaningful lives.
So here's what a dorm room would look like.
I plan to go to college. I look hopefully forward to a golden life of full inclusion.
You currently have students who'd like to communicate in
do not?
Yes, do you look at this where you're equal?
Absolutely equal. Everybody has different things about them.
Yes, I fear losing you.
Wow, DJ.
Deej, we would never desert you. We would never leave you on your own.
Imagine for a minute that you are removed from your home for reasons no one bothers to tell you, because you can't speak, so they assume you can't hear or think or feel.
The prodigal son has returned, spitting image of a lucky strike whore, snarling, wistful me, who once thought anger was a kind of redemption.
You better practice saying it. You got into what? College. It's #1 short.
The world outside greets me either as a hopeful accession or as a real burden to society.
How should I forego fear and go to college individually?
You're just going to grow into it.
Then only you can do it, Deej. Nobody can do it for you.
Being included is every kid's right. It shouldn't be a lottery.
It's a good one, right? I really like it. I think it speaks a lot to the anxieties that our folks have when we're trying to help them with their outcomes. I think there's a place where you get stagnant, where they're not really sure what to do because they've never seen what that looks like before. Folks especially getting community jobs, or folks that have a really hard time getting out and socializing in the community. I think, of course they're scared, and of course that's challenging, and then of course they need to know what the next steps are, and that's why we're here to provide that waiver service to show them what those next steps look like so they can achieve their outcomes. So just making sure that you know that people have a sense of what they're working towards, and that they know what the service is that they're working on right now, how that practical thing is going to lead them towards the thing that they want in the world. I'll keep doing that. Okay, so meaningful opportunities. Inevitably, everyone asks me, they're like, well, meaningful. I'll be on site and they're like, that's so subjective. What does that mean? What does the word meaningful mean? And always, 100% of the time I say it's what's important to the individual. So it's not my definition of meaningful, and it's not your definition of meaningful. It is what is meaningful to that person. So to showcase that, I like this guy right here.
People look at you. They stare. They all stare. They point at you. They shout things. They make you feel different. It's fantastic.
So it's meaningful to him. I think there's plenty of people in this room that was like, if people had to look at me, if I had to be up there in front of people talking, I would not like it. That would be anxiety provoking, and I do not want any part of it. But for another person in the room, it's like where they are alive. They are feeling witnessed, and they're feeling strong and powerful and in charge of what's happening around them. So it has to be what's meaningful to the person, and the best way to do that is during the team meetings or through working with a person to find out what is meaningful. So for instance, like I like to knit, and I find it very meaningful to sit by myself with my cup of tea, with my children gone and my husband doing something else, and I will knit. I make community blankets for children that are born. And I like to do that. My friend likes to go and sit at Panera with like 12 other people and knit, and she likes the conversation and the gossip and seeing what other people are working on, and I'm like, I don't want any of that. That would not be meaningful to me. So sometimes it's about getting out and connecting, and sometimes it's about doing what is important to you or for you. So as long as we see in someone's plan that something is, if it's contraindicated, or if it is not meaningful to them to go out into the world to do the thing they like to do, as long as I see that, then I'm not gonna have any questions about it. But when I see something like someone really wants to get more involved and form friendships and make relationships, and they also really like to knit, then I'm gonna ask questions about what they're doing to create that meaningfulness in their lives. Does that make sense? So you can see there's some key points of what we're looking for. So when I come in for your reviews and we're doing compliance, I'm gonna maybe ask more questions than you're used to. I'm gonna talk about the activities schedule. I'm gonna talk about if individuals gave input for the activities that are happening. I'm gonna find out what's important to and for the individual, and if that's reflected in the services they're receiving. So I wanna make sure that the activities are happening in a naturally encouraging environment. If there is an exercise class, for instance, if folks are really into yoga and then you have someone coming in to do yoga, I'm inevitably going to ask, well, isn't there a place in the community where they could be taking a yoga class? Is there a way that some people have the opportunity to go out to the Y to participate in an exercise class? And then even beyond that, what I see a lot is people go to the Y, but then they'll rent out a room just specifically for their people. So then I'm going to ask, well, is there, is that important to or for the individual, or is there a way that they can be integrated into just the class that everybody signs up for? That make everybody, you guys are doing this. I think you're on it. I touched it.
Now use the clicker.
Now use the clicker. Okay. But like I said, it's challenging. It's hard. It's easy for me to come up here and tell you what this might look like. I can show you some really cute videos that, give us all the feels and make us, want to try harder. But I know that we serve challenging individuals, and I know that this does not, in your minds quite yet, fit every individual you serve. And there's at least 3 people in the back of your head like, yeah, that's all well and good, Kate, but how do we serve these people in this way? And I get that. But we are now required to serve people in this way. So we have to shift our paradigm, we have to have the cultural shifts that take place in our agencies so that we can serve people with the intent to give them full access to their community. And while I understand that it's challenging, there is a spectrum of services that you can offer. It's not just one way or not the right way. There is a spectrum. There's a progression of services that happen. You might start by exploring, you might move on to like some more well-supported communities, events where you have lots of staff and lots of breaks and maybe just a little bit at a time, and pretty soon you're moving along the spectrum so that people are forming natural relationships, and maybe you're dropping them off at the Humane Society for an hour rather than staying with them, 3 years down the road. Like, I have seen that happen, and it's wonderful for some of our most difficult to serve individuals. But that takes a lot of effort, and you need to check with your agency, check your plan writing to make sure that you're not falling into some of the common pitfalls that are the old way of doing things, which is often an inflexible program. A lot of times we'll see an agency provider who has just like a menu of activities that people can choose from. Or they'll specialize. They're like, well, this is the set of services that we offer here. This is what we do. These are the connections in the community that we have, and if people want those services, then they come here. And if they don't want those services, they don't have to come here. And that's an old way of thinking and doing things that isn't very person-centered. So now we want to see that individuals are making the choice about their services, and that if you have an ISP for an individual that you have chosen to serve that has an outcome for volunteering, then you don't have a system right now for volunteer relationships, then those need to be developed so that people have a choice in what they're doing. Sometimes we also see that agencies are fixed on their own personal systemic goals and not necessarily the outcomes of the individuals. So that might be sometimes it has to do, it's complicated and nuanced, I understand, but you might have grant reporting that needs to happen. You might be accountable to stakeholders or board members that are like, well, we want 50 people in this line of employment track, and so we're going to get as many, if their outcome's even a little bit close, we're going to funnel them through that way so that we can meet those quotas. And unfortunately, while I understand the nuance of that situation, I have empathy for it, it's not driven by what's important to the individual. Also, we see a lot that not all of the important people in someone's life are participating in the ISP meetings. So sometimes you might have a favorite staff, a direct care staff that knows everything about you and gets you like clockwork, but they're not at the plan meetings. Or maybe somebody in the community, you've been going to this restaurant every Monday and the server knows your name and you have made friends and you have a lot of common interests and you guys have developed a relationship and she gets you and she advocates for you now. That person can come to your team meetings. And also we see meaningful activities not being offered, or they're not age appropriate, or they're not varied. A lot of times I'll walk into a room and I'll see 20 people all doing a sensory activity, and that'll lead me to ask, how is this, how's the manual manipulation of this object that everyone's playing with important to and for everyone in this room right now? And it's, well, you're either doing this or you're gonna hang out on the sofas and watch TV until that activity's done, because this is the one we're offering right now. So that's not necessarily meaningful to everyone in the room. It's not necessarily, any aspect of community integration during that activity, and it's also not really achieving outcomes for everyone that's involved. So those are some of the pitfalls that we see. But we are seeing some pretty great things happening too. One of my favorite things that I'm seeing is when staff training has been redesigned and developed more to train community networkers or social navigators. They're changing job descriptions from direct care staff to social navigator, and that's been really neat because then staff are taking ownership in like the planning and the implementation of getting out there and making connections. I don't think any of us know how to do that well. Like if you've ever planned a wedding, it's hard to know what everything is out there. I've got to talk to this person to coordinate with this person and go to this place, and the internet has so many options, and how do I know how to use that stuff to make the most out of what my individuals are doing out in the community? So that's been a really exciting thing for me to see. The staff are really doing well. I think we've trained caregivers awesome. I think everyone knows how to do that now, but how to take it to that next step, the staff need to have the tools so that they know how to do that. Also, we're seeing folks that are feeling really good about the stuff that they're doing. They feel in control of the decisions that are happening. They feel in control of where they're heading in their life. We've also seen some really great ISPs and ISP meetings that have all the members of the team and the important people that know what individuals want. And we're seeing new models of service. I think I hear a lot of rumors that we don't want like a location anymore. I've been hearing that a lot. People are like, are we still allowed to have a building? And of course you are. But there are a lot of people who are choosing not to anymore, and that's been kind of exciting. Like a whole mobile agency, basically. People show up and kind of, this bus is going to the library, and this bus is going to the Humane Society, and this one's going to, a meetup group, and then maybe at lunchtime they meet at a church that they have a relationship with, somewhere that they've decided they can have like a potluck or like a meal. People are getting their tube feeds there. They're having a rest for an hour or two, using the bathroom, and then in the afternoon they're heading back out. They're all over town. And maybe they switch, they go to the different places, different buses go to the same locations, or maybe that's when they do their employment exploration in the afternoon. That's maybe where they check out their jobs, or if someone works for an hour or two in the afternoon, that's when they would do that. And then the buses take them home. Like that is happening. And it's a different way of thinking about how services are provided. It's not the only way. We're not advocating for that, but it is interesting to see how people are taking this rule and creating opportunities for community integration. Another interesting thing that I've done, and I know Kelly's seen this too, evening hours for adult day program. People are shifting from that, 9 to 2 model and going from 2 to 9, because community participation and meaningful life engagement doesn't happen on a business day schedule. So that is, people are doing that. They are offering that service to people so that they will bill adult day programming or vocational habilitation during those afternoon and evening hours, because they're finding when they go to the coffee shops and they're pulling down the list of things that are happening, or you go to the grocery store and they're seeing the event page at the local grocery store. It very rarely happens at 10 a.m. Unless you're a mom, then for some reason everything happens at 10 a.m. and I can never go to that stuff. But, usually it's happening in the evenings. So that's that. Do you guys have any questions for me? Really? Because usually I have like a half an hour worth of questions because people are like, well, what about this? And I heard that. Really, no questions?
Can we flip the presentation? Give us just a second to flip the screen here.
All right. So my name is, I've been here before, so I've probably seen some of you before. My name is Kelly Shuck, and I'm the Northwest Ohio Community Life Engagement Project Manager. I should say Employment and Community Life Engagement Project Manager with the Employment First Group at the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. We have 4 of us now in the 4 different regions. We kind of expanded our team to provide support out to providers and county boards and other stakeholders. Today, as I talk, I created a very long presentation to touch on a bunch of different topics. Some of them I might whiz through a little bit, but we're going to send it out so that you have it as a resource. And if you want further information about a specific topic, my contact information is at the back of it. You can get in touch with me. I'm happy to come out and talk with providers. So we're going to do a little bit of an overview of legislation and why we're doing this, and Kate talked a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some of the day services rules and employment services that are out there. We're going to talk about support strategies and resources. So again, we're asking you to have meaningful opportunities and community participation and really person-centered outcomes, but how do you do it, and how do the staff do it on a day-to-day basis? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. These are the regions that we are in right now, our team. I'm in the pink, so I have 24 counties that I support. Our team is relatively new. The expansion of our team is new. And we really are out there trying to help providers do this work. So transform services from facility-based model to a community-based model, and put some strategies in place and some planning tools to help move services forward. We want to meet people where they're at, and we want them to thrive in their communities. We at one point, I'm going to move forward for just a second here. We're saying employment. Everybody needs to go out and work in their community. We wanted people to get jobs. We still want people to get jobs, but not everybody's ready to go out and work in the community. They may have an illness that they're not able to go out and work, or they've been in the same location for a long, long time, and that's not something that they're interested in. That's fine. So let's meet them where they're at and have some discussion about progress and how we can help them have meaningful opportunities and participate in their community in other ways that are individual focused and person-centered. So I'm going to go back. This is just a little bit of a video to talk about when we say community life engagement, what does that mean? So hopefully it works.
Inclusion means for me a community and a society where everyone has respect and regard for one another.
Having the same rights and ability and spending power and presence in the community as everyone else.
Inclusion means to me opportunity to do stuff on an equal footing.
It means the opportunity for everyone to achieve their potential.
Looking at each person for who they are, their skills, their abilities, and what they can each bring to the community.
People with disabilities are acknowledged for their rights.
Inclusion means that I can just go out there, go wherever I want to go, and do whatever I want to do.
I don't want to be singled out because I'm different, because I'm short or long, because I've got hearing aids and I can't hear. It doesn't make everything different. You're valuable. I just want to be there and participate like everybody else.
That knowing whether they have a disability are not only members of every society worldwide.
Just try to create disability like a minor need.
Giving someone a choice and making them feel empowered is taking into account each and every person that we're dealing with and respecting that.
Recognise the humanity in people. It is a community where everyone who has a desire and ambition are supported and encouraged to follow it and to dream big, one and all.
I think we have the makings of a really fantastic community that can continue to lead Australia and hopefully the world.
So when we're talking about community life engagement, this is what we're talking about: giving people choice, power, equity, the ability to participate, the ability to make decisions for themselves. As Kate mentioned, I wanted to just follow up on that piece. So Kate is the settings reviewer, and she's with the Office of Provider Standards and Review, and she's looking at minimum compliance when she's out visiting your agencies. And my role is kind of complementary to Kate's in that I am here to provide training and technical assistance throughout the region to providers and county boards and other stakeholders. I've talked a lot to teachers and there can be other groups, family members or people first meetings, whoever is interested in learning more about employment or community life engagement. I'm really there to help move things forward, and I really would love to see you before Kate comes out. So please get in touch with me if we haven't talked already. Just a little bit of history. Kate mentioned the CMS legislation that kind of prompted Ohio to say we need to make some changes in the area of community life engagement. In Ohio, some of the legislation that's happened is Employment First. The executive order was signed implementing Employment First on March 19th of 2012. So Employment First has been in our state now for over 6 years, and that's pretty impressive. Really, the Employment First executive order states that community employment is the first and preferred option for all individuals with disabilities. We understand that, again, people are not going to all be out working right this very second. So we want to meet people where they're at. It's not employment, it's employment first, it's not employment only. So our definition of the work that we're doing has expanded from community or employment first to community life engagement, and that was why we changed our title some. That we're really focused on helping providers look at their ADS programs and their VOCAP programs and the certifications that they have and how those programs operate so that they are helping people have meaningful opportunities and work towards their individual outcomes for people and really help them participate in the community. It is a culture shift. It's a culture shift again from that menu of service. Like, these are the things that we have to offer, and if you come here, these are the things that you do. It's also a shift from saying, do you want to work, to where do you want to work? What would you like to do? What types of things are you interested in? Learning and getting to know people, and really somebody, I'm a different person at home than I am at work. So learning more about the things that are interesting to the person at home and maybe incorporating some of those things into their day or helping them connect. Kate talked about knitting, so she knits at home, probably, I'm thinking. So is there something that you can help her connect with during the day that also has to do with that interest in that area of interest for her? We want working to be the norm, not the exception, or the opportunity, and we always want the opportunity to be there. I'm going to talk specifically about a few things with the Employment First Administrative Rule. So this rule went into effect back in 2012, and it talks about that every individual of working age will have a person-centered planning process. It's part of the SSA rule that happens. It's really part of every rule that person-centered planning process happens, and it is there to help identify outcomes for the person as well as the path that they are on to community employment. Every person of working age should be on a path to community employment, and that should be identified in their plan. And then services and supports are put in place, those action steps and outcomes are put in place to help support the person to progress. And that progression might be community participation, it may be community employment related, but we always want to help the person make some progress and make connections in their life. So one thing that I'd like to talk about is progress reports. Part of the new tool when OPSR reviewers are out looking at your services are you providing a progress report to the SSAs if somebody is receiving an employment service? Those employment services are vocational habilitation, career planning, all the career planning components, group employment support, and individual employment support. If you're receiving one of those services, or the individuals you're supporting are receiving one of those services, then you as an agency should be pulling together a progress report that talks about what path is the person on? What's the person's outcome? What steps have you taken to help the person achieve that outcome over the past year? And then what barriers have you faced? So if somebody says, I'm really interested in learning about computers. Well, there are lots and lots of different jobs. They're not ready to work, they just want to learn more about it, so maybe they're on path 3. And they have an outcome to explore different jobs related to computers to see if they may be interested in working in the future. And some of the things that you've done is gone out and explore different types of work with computers. So maybe data entry or medical transcription or even a GameStop where you're working with gaming systems, because sometimes people think of that as computer-like work. And what you've discovered is the person doesn't like it. They have no interest in it. They thought they might be interested. It's important to note that and bring that back to the team so then those outcomes can be revised and you can talk about what's next. And then you want to make some recommendations in addition in that progress report. So you're bringing something to the team to say, we've really done a lot of work this year. These are some of the things we've done. These are the barriers we're faced. And here's our recommendation for the future. Let's have some team discussion about it. Let's bring the individual into that conversation and really allow them the opportunity to shape their future. I was asked to touch on the Employment First Outcome Tracking System, so I have just a few slides on that. The Employment First Outcome Tracking System and entering data into the Employment First Outcome Tracking System is part of the Employment First rule. It is also part of the tool when the review specialists are out talking to you and they're doing their settings review. They are going to ask about the Employment First Outcome Tracking System, and are you either entering data or providing information to the county so that they can get the data entered. And I personally, I work with 2 review specialists, so Kate in some of my counties and then Tina in other counties. I've seen a lot of citations surrounding the Employment First Outcome Tracking System in the past several months. There are some specific things. So in Sandusky County, the county board enters the information. Maki, right, am I saying her name correctly, is the kind of data expert, and she is the person that needs this information to get in the system. We are doing a big push with the Employment First Outcome Tracking System to get all of the data updated and entered in by the end of May. So if you have not gotten this information to Maki, please get it to her. We want to send a field report out in June. We have a data expert who is on our team, Lindsay Terry Stein, and she is really digging into this system, and she's going to pull some employment data and say what settings people are at, what is the average wage of somebody that's working in the state of Ohio, where are they working, how many hours are they working, what type of setting are they in. But we can't do that, and it won't be accurate if we don't get the data from all of you. So
I have a question about that.
Sure.
I've gotten an email before with regards to Employment First data. So if you're saying that the reviewers are citing agencies, how is it that they will or will not know if we supply the information from our agency?
They can see the system. They can see if the information is entered. If you're, I know you're not, you don't, do you have a lot of people in Sandusky County? You said Lucas.
Yes, ma'am.
So Lucas County, the provider is responsible for entering the data. If you don't have access, send me an email and we can work through it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the county board in Lucas County actually has somebody on site now that can, Becky Thiemann is in charge of entering some county data, and she is in that system and can help you through the process as well. Yeah, Sarah.
Can you clarify if it is discovered that the information is not in the system, who's getting the citation? The county board's entering it on behalf of the providers? Is the county board getting the citation, or the providers are not providing it?
I have seen it, and Kate I can speak, and then if I'm wrong, you just interrupt me. So I've seen it both ways. If the county board is requesting the information and they have documentation to show, hey, I made all of these requests from the provider agency and I didn't get the data, the site's going to the provider. If the provider has supplied the data, the county hasn't entered it, then obviously it would go to the county. Do you have information to add?
The only other thing I'll add is that sometimes we'll go to providers and they just have no system to even collect the data on their own end. There's no documentation about wages or hours worked. And so even if the county board hasn't necessarily asked for it, we would still cite the provider because they don't have a system for collecting it at all. So even if the county board were to ask for it, they wouldn't be able to supply it.
Right. Yeah.
I have a question. I'm an independent provider. My patient's in college right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that on, even if he would go to get a job, would I be responsible for getting that to the SSI?
No, not necessarily unless
Okay.
you're providing a career planning service.
Okay.
This is only for employment services.
Okay.
Yeah. And the only employment service that an independent provider can provide is career planning. So, any other questions? I have a couple more slides here. This is the piece from the rule basically saying that you should collect and submit the data to the department regarding individuals, and it goes into the scope of what the data is that should be collected. These are the things that need to be entered. So these are on the slides that you'll get. This is what Maki needs to enter the information. For a community-based employment setting, so somebody working in the community that you're supporting through individual employment supports, these are the things that the county needs to enter in. This is what the system is requiring right now. And then for sheltered employment, so if somebody's in a vocab setting or group employment support, these are the things that somebody would need to know. This would also be similar for what you would do for career planning, because career planning are all of the services that lead up to somebody getting a job, and you're not going to necessarily have all of the data of the wages and the name of the employer because they're not working yet. So it would look more similar to what's required for sheltered employment. Any questions about the employment first outcome tracking system? Yes.
That is related to if you're billing the vote codes, correct?
Yeah, this
It doesn't
is
matter the wage that you're paying, it doesn't matter if you're
correct.
doing your piece rate or anything, it's based
Correct.
on your waiver billing, am I correct?
Yes, so that's a great point. If you are billing, you have a volunteer program where you're taking people out to volunteer in areas of interest to the person, and you're not necessarily paying a wage, but you're billing vocational habilitation, you are still going to have to fill out this information or send it in. It is based on the type of billing that you send in for the person. So it's those 4 employment codes. So if you're billing career planning, group employment support, individual employment support, and then vocab. Sorry. Any other questions or things that I missed that you wanted me to add? Okay. I'm happy to answer questions. Lindsay is our data expert, and she can answer specific questions. She can get you access to the system if you need it. She can talk about how you enter the data. There are some specific quirks with this system. We're looking at modifying the system or changing it up a little bit after we get this field notice out in June. So there may be some updates or some changes. We really want it to be as efficient as possible. We don't want you spending a lot of time having to enter this data, but we also need it because we have set through our transition plan that we provided to the federal government for all of the settings. We've provided the federal government with some benchmarks. So by the end of 2018, we have said we'll have 30% of people that we support employed in the community. It's really hard to report that out if we don't have accurate data. So that's why we're having this big push to get this information. So when we talk about community employment, I'm gonna breeze through this, but it's competitive and integrated. When somebody is working out in the community, we want to see that they are working alongside people with and without disabilities, and we want them to be making minimum wage or higher. We want them to have the same experiences that people have that are working beside them. So if they are making minimum wage, but the person next to them is making $10.50 an hour, as is everybody else, that's not competitive. If they don't have the ability to get promotions, or they don't have the ability to have benefits, that's also an issue. That's not necessarily competitive. We're seeing that in a few places where people are working with employers, and we want that relationship there, and we want that opportunity, but it maybe is a stepping stone to something else, to actual employment with the employer, so that they are earning the same wage and have the same experiences and opportunities. Is everybody familiar with the paths to employment? I know the SSAs are all the providers. So I'm not gonna necessarily go through those. Some things about the paths are that we really want to emphasize that everybody has abilities and skills. A way of describing what the service is without getting into the rule itself. That's those are on DODD's website. Mhm. I mentioned career planning services. I wanted to touch on it for just a second. So when we revised the rules, April 1st of 2017, so these rule revisions have been in effect for over a year, which is why we're coming up on that June 1st date that everybody's plans should be in compliance because they've been around for over a year now. We split supported employment community into kind of two different things. We have career planning, which is all the services that somebody might need to receive to become employed in the community. And then we have individual employment supports that go into place when somebody gets that job. So career planning has 9 different components, and I'm not going to remember them all off the top of my head, but it's career exploration, worksite or situational observation, which is similar to a CBA in the OOD world. There's career discovery, there's benefits analysis and education. There's worksite, did I say worksite accessibility? There's technology and assistive technology, and there are 9 of them. And they all go into helping somebody be successful in a community job. Some of them are about learning more about the person. Some of them are talking about what skills they might show in a work setting. Career planning services are great to blend and braid with OOD services. If you have somebody who is on a Path 3 or Path 4, they're not ready to be referred to OOD yet, you can use some of those career planning services to help them make progress along their path. Even if they're in a VOCAP setting or an ADS setting, these services can sometimes be authorized. 3 of the services require additional training. 6 of them do not. And I think there was some misconception when the rule first rolled out to providers that you had to have additional training to provide these services. Well, yeah, you do for 3 of them, but for 6 you don't. For career discovery, career exploration, worksite observation, and assessment, you don't have to have any additional training. And I have resources that you can use to start providing some of these services. It's really nice when you are able to provide a continuum because it allows you to meet people where they're at and help individualize those services some. So if you want to learn more about career planning, I'm happy to talk with you.
I have a quick question on career planning.
Sure.
We kind of ran into it with the billing units for that. When they do conversions for that, everybody has to go to 15-minute increments?
No.
For the whole person?
No.
So I kind of was wondering about that because their day services had to change for 15-minute billing units.
It depends on how the service is authorized, and I would say we need to probably talk further about that. The career planning services are outcome-based. Are you saying that if they're receiving a career planning service, then their vocab has to be individual-based?
Well,
career planning is
it
outcome.
had nothing to do with me for vocab.
Okay.
They had it through a different service, and it changed everybody.
A lot of the services through career planning are outcome-based, which is new to our system.
Yeah.
It is, you provide the service, you provide a report to the SSA and the team, and then you get paid a lump sum. That's it. So there are very few, maybe job development or career exploration that can be billed as units. I have some further information on that I can provide, but most of them are outcome-based. It's a one-time service, and it's report-based from the provider.
There was something when it got added or whatever, it wouldn't let them, because that one had to be broken down.
Sometimes they do have to be billed in 15-minute units.
In the pause, it wouldn't let, everything had to be changed to 15 minutes.
I think I see a lot of people on group employment that'll get switched over to 15-minute units at the same time that they have career planning added.
Okay.
So that might be what happened.
Let's talk individually because that's not how it's supposed to be. So, group employment I mentioned. You know, in the past, we've kind of thought of vocab and group employment as destinations for people. That they went to a vocab setting and that was their work. Well, you're really, again, it's shifting that mentality from being an employer to being a provider. And the provider's role through Medicaid is to help the person achieve their outcome and make progress. So group employment is the same thing. If you're working on an enclave or a work crew out in the community, there should be progress made towards the person at gaining competitive integrated employment in the community. Individual employment supports are those things that people get to support them once they get a job. So job coaching, follow along or job retention services. A new component with individual employment supports was personal care. They could have some personal care come and you could receive some personal care services on the work site if necessary while you're receiving another service. So if you're getting some job coaching and you need some personal care until you have figured out a long-term solution, you can have that service added in. All right, I'm going to skip through this a little bit. So I just want to emphasize community life engagement, that we don't want people just to be located in their community, that we don't want somebody to be on a schedule of services throughout the day, that it's more than fun and recreational activities, that we want people to have active participation and membership in their community. We want them to have connections in the community. There are a couple different examples that I'll give. One is somebody who was insistent on going to McDonald's in the morning on Tuesdays in a county that I've been to. And the reason that providers like, well, we can go on Wednesday or Thursday. No, it's meaningful to them to go on Tuesday. Well, why is it meaningful? We asked that why question. Well, they had met and developed a relationship with the cashier that worked on Tuesday mornings. They had a dialogue that was meaningful to the person. And that is important. So that's part of the plan. They go on Tuesdays for that reason. A provider agency, again, that was struggling with an outcome that was meaningful. The team was struggling with it. I was, at this point, was talking to SSAs. And we looked at the important 2 and the important 4 and realized that the person was interested in gardening. They like to garden at their house. So the provider was like, well, we'll put in a garden at their location. No, let's not do that. Let's talk about what community resources and community participation we can access. So there's a community gardening club. Let's talk about how to get the person connected to the gardening club. There's a community garden. Let's take that person, maybe a couple others that are interested in gardening, to go garden at the community garden. Going to the library, learning more about gardening. Those are all things that can happen that would be meaningful to the person, and then connect them to different communities and have that person take on some different roles. So when you're thinking of your own life, every time that you interact or do something, you are fulfilling a role. You are a mother, a daughter, a sibling, a spouse. In addition to those, you're an employee, you're a leader, you might be a musician, you're a reader, a cook, a maid, a taxi. Those are mine for my 3 kids that I run around all day. You might be a band booster, you might be a parishioner at a church, but really it's talking about the people that we're supporting have fewer roles than we do. So how do we expand the roles that they have in their life? And how are we helping to expand those roles through the work that we're doing? And how are we helping to expand those roles by connecting them and helping them make a contribution? There was a day program that I worked with that served some people with some very complex needs. And something that they did was really connect. They were really looking to explore options to help the people contribute. And they weren't always necessarily successful going out. There were times that they could go out into the community, but what they did was they formed a relationship with their Veterans Association. And then from their Veterans Association, they got a listing of every veteran in their community that had a birthday that month. And those individuals made birthday cards for all of those people, and then they went out and delivered them. And that provided value to them in a meaningful way, and it was a creative way to really provide that connection to somebody who has some complex needs. So it's really about exploring opportunities and finding those opportunities and connecting people. I'm going to skip the video because we're running short on time. What time is it? Oh, it's 12:01. So the back end of this presentation is just a listing of all kinds of resources. There's all kinds of websites. The links are in here, and then some on community employment and community life engagement, and then my contact information. So I don't need to go through those. You can look at them. Thank you so much. And if you have any other questions, you can come and talk with Kate or I.
Before you go,